Breaking news, authorities are investigating yesterday's shooting in Chattanooga as an act of terrorism. Meanwhile, we are learning more about the shooter. 24-year-old Mohammed Yusuf Abdulaziz briefly worked at an Ohio nuclear plant back in 2013. He had at least 2 long guns and a pistol during yesterday's rampage. And investigators are looking into his travels overseas. As of right now, the FBI says it cannot confirm yesterday's shooting was ISIS-inspired. Having said that, what is social media's role in stopping ISIS? Well, there's free speech and then there's hate speech. I like what's happening at Reddit. This is like the heart and soul of the internet community, and they have nailed it with restrictions on content. They don't want content that incites violence, pornography, or bullying. Joining us now to discuss this, Tammy Bruce, Fox News political contributor, Lieutenant Steve Rogers, former FBI National Joint Terrorism Task Force senior officer, and Lisa Daftari, Fox News contributor. Guys, you know, it's not publicly traded. People outside of the know don't understand, but Reddit under a lot of fire within the internet community because they have drawn a line. And if you do anything that even they sense smacks of bullying, forget about terrorism, pornography, anything that's offensive, they will cut you out. What I don't understand, Tammy, is why can't Twitter do that? Why can't Facebook do that?
Well, look, I think what they're doing over at Reddit is actually reasonable. They're saying that you can not like a certain group, but you can't threaten to kill that certain group. And they'll ban you if you do that. But they won't ban you if, let's say, if you hate a certain group. They will put you into like a certain category. It's almost like at the 7-Eleven with pornography. It's behind the counter. You can't really see it. You have to ask for it. It's not going to come up in search engines or even in searches on the site. It's a reasonable precaution in this new world. Twitter could figure out a way to do that.
I think so.
Well, at the same time, you have functions on Twitter where you can block people yourself, you can mute them, you can clear up your own timeline.
But I think the problem, though, Steve, is that there's so many websites. I know at one point 46,000 perhaps, 100,000 tweets a day from ISIS and ISIS-inspired groups. Why couldn't Twitter do this? Listen, if someone is accused of cyberbullying, Twitter will cut them out. They'll cut them off. Why can't you cut off the biggest, most deadly bullies on the planet?
Charles, Twitter can do it, but let's take it a step further. Allow the NSA to do their job. What we have seen through this administration and through the Justice Department, the hindrance of the NSA to conduct surveillances. Now, I know it's controversial, but my goodness, I want a country left to live in. And the only way we're going to do that is if we give the intelligence community the capabilities, not to spy on people, but my goodness, to monitor what's going on and then proceed from there.
Lisa, I want to ask you, ISIS, how did they become so savvy? All of a sudden, this group, this JV team in the middle of the desert gets all of these weapons, it gets this groundswell, it takes over giant swaths of lands in several different countries, and now they're more savvy on the internet than we are?
Right, and that's the problem. And you're asking the best question because they're taking old school jihadism and bringing Jihad 2.0, bringing this combination to the forefront. They've always been one step ahead of us, and that's where we have the problem of always playing catch up and being reactive instead of proactive, whether it's on the web, on the battlefield, or anywhere else. And the problem is, yes, I don't want my little cousins to be bullied on Twitter or on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever, or Instagram, wherever else it is. But at the same time, from a counterterrorism point of view, I want that information. I want that intel to be there. I did a story where I was doing what ISIS is selling antiquities.
Would it be better just to stop that message from getting to potential targets, or you think?
No, but there's a debate.
I don't think we're acting on this information enough.
Exactly.
To justify its existence.
Meaning there has to be a risk reward, right?
Right.
So they are using American platforms, and that's one side of the debate. Why allow these jihadi groups to use American platforms to recruit, to spread their propaganda? What do we gain from having them be on this? Yes, take them off, but also gain the intel while you're doing that.
But you know, a lot of people would say, I'm certainly, my libertarian friends and a few others, hey, the Constitution, Judge Napolitano is here, First Amendment, freedom of speech, even Twitter and these other guys. But there is. Don't we draw a line, though, between freedom of speech and yelling fire in a crowded movie theater?
The First Amendment's about the government curtailing speech, right? Twitter is, as a company, private or publicly held, they can do what they want. The issue when it comes to, yes, using what's on Twitter or on social media is actually acting on it. We clearly don't. Now, Twitter kills ISIS accounts as often as they come up and when they can find them. The difference is, of course, is will they be compelled to do that? And if there's information...
It's not fair to say that we don't, because it's a needle in a haystack. There's so much out there. There have been a lot of plots that have been foiled since 9/11.
No doubt, Lisa.
I know that that's yours.
Charles, let me add this if I can.
I haven't heard of these plots that have been foiled through Twitter, though, and the NSA.
Oh, no, I haven't heard of Twitter, but perhaps we know a lot have been foiled.
Intel.
The judge, I love the judge. He's a great guy. I respect him. We're good friends. But I've got to share this with you. We are at war. And when you're at war, you
So do you junk the Constitution when you're at war?
We're not junking the Constitution. These search warrants, they have to go to FISA courts, and the courts have to approve of these warrants. But what we need to do is think big, and the big thing to think about is the survival of our country.
This is what I don't get, Lisa. We keep talking about, they move them, there's a bunch of things, we take them down, they put more up, and they're not. How does an American kid find these sites? That's what I don't get. We can't find them, but some kid in Akron, Ohio may stumble on it tonight.
That's their expertise. They know exactly how to appeal to this bracket.
But why can't we also have the same mind as potential targets in this country?
Because they're not a bunch of jihadis from that cave where Osama bin Laden was launching this attack. They actually recruit people out of film school, these engineers, people who know social media, and they know how to speak to their constituents. They have rap videos and they have Instagram accounts. And the bottom line is this: whether they are able to link up with these young people or these young people are able to link up with them, that linkage is happening. These aren't lone wolves anymore.
Well, I don't. Yeah, to that point, Steve, we keep hearing that. The White House stressing yesterday, President Obama stressing, said lone gunmen. We keep hearing, different ways of not really pinpointing what everyone knows. I don't know if it's the 800-pound gorilla, elephant in the room, or whatever you want to call it, but certainly that's frustrating a whole lot of people. Doesn't that tie the hands of law enforcement?
Charles, we are going to be engaged in a war unlike anything we've ever seen.
When are we going to start fighting that war?
Well, that's the point. We instead of fighting it, we're surrendering. You heard from these young ladies here that we are surrendering our capabilities to ISIS. We fight the war by getting intelligence information to the local cops and to the people, and that's how we win it.
All right, guys, the nation continues to mourn the deaths of 4 Marines brutally killed on U.S. soil. You are now looking at images of Chattanooga. That's the pastor there, and an Air Force veteran breaking down in tears at a makeshift memorial for fallen heroes. That was yesterday. Earlier today, I had a chance to speak with both of them. Matthew Spurgeon, here he is on Your World.
I started feeling multitudes of emotions, not only for the injured, but for the deceased. And when I saw that on my phone, I knew I had to come over here and experience it for myself.
The victims of yesterday's shooting have been identified. Lance Corporal Skip Wells, Gunny Sergeant Thomas Sullivan, Staff Sergeant David Wyatt, and Sergeant Carson Holmquist as well. Guys, that was a very powerful image. I want to go back to the image for a moment. And I had a chance to interview both the Reverend and also the Air Force vet, and it touched me a lot. I'm glad the show ended when it did. It's amazing to me, Tammy, that we often need these kind of events, these heinous, evil events that kind of bring us together, but I'm glad there are images like that.
But that's the key, is that we can't go from event to event like this. There is a point where there's a tipping point. Now the conversation is about whether or not young men like that, heroic men like that, can defend themselves. Are our warriors being kept from being able to have weapons to defend themselves? It sends the message still always that we can't even trust them because they are warriors. These are the conversations now that, as the American people, we have to insist we finalize the nature of what we expect from them and that they're able to defend themselves, but mostly also admit who the enemy is, because all of this stuff that we're doing and not admitting, when Obama said lone gun man as opposed to lone wolf, It's the difference between a criminal assessment and a terrorism assessment. And he meant to do that. This is why this continues to happen, and this is what we have to begin to reject.
Lisa, I suspect the way we speak, when I say we, the president, let's say talk, the president of the United States talks about this and all of these series of events and his inability to call out radical Islam. I suspect that actually emboldens our enemy. It somehow makes them feel like, hey, maybe some people over there, including the commander-in-chief, have a certain amount of sympathy for us. They think we're doing this because we're poor, we lack job opportunities, and will not call it what it is. Doesn't that embolden them?
Yeah, absolutely, because we have a president that puts political correctness before national security and the security of his citizens. And you know what the scary part is? This is just the beginning, because you have 25,000 foreign fighters that went over to fight in Syria from 100 different countries. And the statistic is that there's only 250, I say only, but 250 Americans. I guarantee you that number is much higher. When these 250 Americans with their American passports come back to America and launch attacks in their local neighborhoods, are we still going to call them lone wolves? Or are we going to acknowledge that they went over to a jungle to become emboldened and to be trained?
Steve, why are we letting people leave this country for 6, 7 months at a time, make repeat visits to the Middle East, come back here without any sort of surveillance? I mean, isn't that the ultimate red flag these days?
It sure is, but we're more concerned when I say we, the administration, and you know, I don't like hammering this all the time, but it's the truth.
You got to hammer it, though, right? I mean, we got to tell the truth. That's what we're talking about here.
The administration and the Justice Department are more concerned about being politically correct. And the fact of the matter is, it's killing this country. You know, my son's a Marine, and before I came on air, I just had a discussion with him. I said, how you doing? He says, you know what? Marines will grieve for a certain period of time, but we want to get even. We want to strike back. So here, our military wants to do their job, but our politicians, they won't let them do their job.
Tammy, let me ask you, why is this politically correct? You know, I mean, political correctness, I always thought, moved around and shifted with public opinion.
Yeah.
I don't think public opinion thinks we should coddle these guys anymore. So why does it continue to be politically correct with the White House and certain members of the media not to call out radical Islam?
Well, see, that's just it. It's limited to the establishment. This is an establishment that wants to say that the war is over, that everything is fine. It's like in the Star Wars, this is not the Jedi you've been looking for. They believe that if they say it on television, it's going to be true. And then he can leave and say, look what I did with the economy.
Yeah,
we ended the war. But the fact is, for every single American watching this program and their friends, we know what the truth is. We face it every single day. There is heartache,
Well,
and we're in charge of this, and we can change
perhaps
it.
conventional wisdom and political correctness will all be on the same page. And if it really is the will of the people, then we'll start calling it what it is. And to your point, Steve, we'll let your son and his buddies take care of them.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
Bravo.
Hey,
Bravo.
tech stocks on fire. Google.